Well, Adam Wuiske here again for the second part of Two Blokes Chinwag. And I'm here today with Gordy Robinson, the one and only El Presidente, dictator for life and dear leader of the NMRA. And that facial expression says it all. How are you, mate?
I'm all right. Yeah, doing all right. Not too bad at all.
Did you like that one?
I loved it. Absolutely, yeah. Dear leader, absolutely.
You could commune with
we'll see.
6 months old, couldn't you?
We'll see. I'm only the dear leader for as long as I keep getting re-elected.
Yeah. How long is the term for NMRA?
It's three years basically.
Right. Okay.
So it's a 3-year term, but if you're a director, you're term limited, so you can do 2 3-year terms. But currently, as the president, you are not limited, so you can do technically as many as you may wish, or you're elected to do. So they're still a 3-year term.
So what's the likelihood? Are you going to be re-elected in your opinion, or are you going to be shot peacefully away, or what?
We'll see. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. We'll see whether I want to do it. My wife might not want me to.
That's actually a question that most people really don't ask, isn't it?
What's that?
But do you actually want to do it?
Well, that's it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's fine. We'll just see how it goes. Depends where I'm at, what I'm doing, because you don't get much time to do your own hobby when you're doing this.
Yeah.
Like those hours, and you've only got 24 hours in a day. So if you're using those hours to do voluntary stuff, it's great. But like last night, I probably spent a couple of hours on a Friday night doing NMRA stuff. This morning when I woke up, before I even got out of bed, I was answering emails. So you like losing that modelling time. Whereas before I was the president of NMRA, I'd get up and I'd do 30 minutes of modelling before I even got going in the morning, just to make sure I'd done something every day. And I had this thing on my blog, you can see on my website on gordy.uk. It just came to an end when I became the president. I was doing something every single day modelling. I was trying to do 365 days of modelling, something every single day. As soon as I became president, doosh, modelling time gone. So it's a sacrifice. So you've got to weigh it up.
So one thing I've never asked you. So we've sort of known each other for a few years, right? But I've never actually asked you, how the hell do you become president of NMRA? Because obviously your very, very strong Southern American accent notwithstanding, right?
You could drop more y'alls in the conversation if you want.
Actually,
make you feel better.
But you are the first president not from the United States of that place, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the first president in the UK. Well, from anywhere outside the United States of America. There's never been go back and look at all the previous presidents of the NMRA. There's never been a president of the NMRA from outside the US, and since the founding, there's not been a president who was as young as I was when I became the president. I suppose the thing is, when we were formed 90 years ago, the average age of members was about my age now, right? And now it's technically almost every member of the NMRA is old enough to be my father, and most of them are old enough to be my grandfather. That's the thing. It's not just that I'm the first person outside the US. It's how young I was when I became the president. But it doesn't really matter. It's more. I think it's more just about a willingness to want to do it. I don't think it matters where you're from. If you're willing to put the time and effort into it. But I never thought when I was 14 I'd end up doing this.
Yeah, I mean, but how did it sort of happen?
Well, right. So let's go back. So you got to go back to 2016. I went to my first British Region convention, and I was a guy called Mike Hughes, who was the marketing guy for the British Region. Set up he's a taxi driver in London, and he's very, very good at setting up his stall at any major thoroughfare in any convention, right? So he'd set himself up between the front and back door of this hotel. So there's like, it was in the lobby sort of, but it wasn't really that kind of place. It was like an old house that had been converted into a conference centre. And you went through the front door, and he was on the right-hand side. And there was a corridor across the front of the building, and then a corridor at 90 degrees that went to the back door. And he sat himself in that corner. And I'd been in the building all of about 15 minutes when he spotted, "Hey, young person, come here." And he sat down and talked to me for hours and hours and hours and persuaded me to talk to me about social media. Now, they weren't very good at it, but I'd been doing some social media stuff for a beer-related organisation, let's just say that, with my then girlfriend, who was a raving alcoholic. And she sat down and spoke to him about social media, and then he said, "Why don't you do this for us?" So I did. I said, "Yeah, sure. I could post a few things on Facebook and manage a Facebook group, whatever." So I did. Then the year after, I went to... I was in the US for work. I was in Atlanta. And I noticed that the week after this event in Atlanta, well, 2 weeks after, was the national convention. It was in Orlando, Florida in 2017. So I was like, I think I can make this work. So I said to my boss at work, "I'm going to come over for this company retreat. Can I stay for a week afterwards and go and see some customers, and then take a week's vacation?" And they were like, "Sure." So my flights were then paid for. So I ended up going over, and I flew Southwest down to Orlando, and I stayed in a hotel, like a really grotty motel. Mm-hmm. Martin Jenkins will tell you all about my choices of hotel. There was no bullet holes in the windows of this one, but it was really grotty. And it's Orlando, and I was a big guy, but it was a mile walk up the main road in Orlando to the convention. So anyway, so I stayed there, and I was hiking in every day. So I wasn't at the convention hotel the whole time. I wasn't there in the evening. I wasn't hanging out in the bar or whatever. But one of the directors was from the UK, NMRA directors, and Kathy Miller. And she spotted me. She didn't know I was coming. She spotted me, and she was like, "Oh, it's great to see you. I didn't know you were here." And introduced me to then Christina, who was the marketing contractor for the NMRA, Jerry Leone. And that was it. And what I was doing is I was posting on the British region's Facebook page while everything that I was doing at the convention, right? And suddenly these Americans started getting very pissed off, saying, "Why am I having to go to the British region's Facebook page to find out about what's happening at our national convention?" Right? And I ended up sitting in a clinic. This would have been on the Monday, so this started on the Saturday. So on the Monday, I was sitting in a clinic, in a Modelling with the Masters clinic, and the then president, Charlie Getz, came around to see how the Modelling with the Masters was doing and said hello to me. And Christina said hello to me, and she must have remembered that we'd been introduced a couple of days earlier. And she said, "Is it you that's posting? Are you posting all these pictures from the convention?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Well, could you share some with me?" I said, "Oh, I can do, or why don't you just give me the keys to the national social media pages and I'll just post directly." So that's when I got the passwords, and I then joined the social media team. And at that point, there was me, one other guy who was doing there was two of us. There was Thomas Gazier, who was doing the Twitter, as it was then, now X, and there was another guy monitoring the Facebook group for the NMRA, but there was no one posted on the Facebook page. And that's how I then got involved in National, and started helping with social media, getting more involved, and that sort of got you into the inner workings then, because you're being asked to share stuff. And the year after, the year after that, I then met my now wife, Alex, and we came out. I brought her out to the States for a first trip when we went to Amherst, and we were going around Amherst. I was recruiting partners for the NMRA partnership program, and I was getting more and more involved in what the national team was doing. Now then, when we went to Amherst, it was just me and Christina who would go to Amherst. I paid for it myself, just in case anyone listening to this is thinking, "Oh yeah, Gordy's been milking trips on the NMRA." I wasn't. I paid for it myself. But I'd go and recruit as many like vendors to be partners. And then in the summer in 2018, we went out to Kansas City, and that's when I met Martin Jenkins for the first time. And I went to the board meeting, and I actually started live posting from the board meeting.
All right.
Out on social media. that was the first time that had ever happened. Like, people were joining along with what was going on. I wasn't live streaming it or anything, but I was just like
Did you get any
posting about it.
pushback from doing that sort of thing from within, or
Pardon?
did you get any sort of pushback from live posting during these meetings?
Oh, I never asked permission because I was obviously used to be in the military, so I don't believe in asking permission. I believe for begging forgiveness. So yeah, there was a few people going, "How's this happening?" And they realised I was sitting in the corner. It was like, "Oh, the guy that brought the donuts is there posting about everything that we're doing." And suddenly, this whole new wave of transparency came around because that had never happened before.
Mm-hmm.
Before, it was like a few months later, the minutes would come out. So I genuinely got more and more involved. The year after, I put my name forward to be the at-large worldwide director, which is Martin's current job, and came second. Got a really high number of votes, considering I was not that well known. I was from outside of North America, everything else. But I was still involved in the national team. So for about 3 years, up until before COVID, I'd been heavily involved in the national team on the kind of inside the fence, doing the social media. Because if you want to know what's going on in a business, because the NMRA is a business, then join the marketing department, right? Because you're going to be talking about it a lot. So then when COVID started, well, when the lockdown started, my big worry was I've worked in healthcare for a long time, and I have a lot of my father's age friends are single men. Their wives have either realised that they needed to be divorcing them, or they've ended up being widowers. And I was like, oh my God, all these people are going to be on their own at home, staring at the same four walls, driving themselves potty. And this isn't just a UK thing, this is the entire world. It's like, I've got to do something. So I said, like, what can we do? I know what we can do. We talk about trains on the internet, and we'll live stream it. And no one will, either people really like it, or they'll not, but at least it'll give some people something to do. They'll engage with their hobby, and if we make it go on YouTube or Facebook, we did it on Facebook Live, people can interact. So like, it'll get these guys actually thinking about something other than the four walls that they're looking at all day. And then NMRA started, so then all of a sudden everybody kind of suddenly knew, hey, who's this Gordy guy? And yes, I didn't ask permission to do NMRA. I just did it. And because back in 2017 someone had given me the keys to the front door, I just got on with it. So let's just say there was some very positive emails, and there was some emails that wanted to take me to the mount and crucify me in front of the whole world for how dare I do something for other people without making them pay for it. How dare I?
Really?
And so
they wanted,
you know, and
they wanted money for this. They thought, oh, we can. More out of it.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Like, there's the capitalism is strong, right?
Well, I honestly thought what you were about to say was that the pushback you got was, oh, you're using our name and you don't represent us and all of that garbage. But no, it was about dollars.
Always about dollars. Yeah.
I
was like, this is crazy. This is absolutely, like, the world's going through something completely unprecedented, and you're interested in making a book out of it. Like, no. I just ignored it. I just was like, whatever. You know, the old, as they say in Scotland, you're entitled to your opinion, but you're wrong, you know. There's a difference. An opinion and fact, you know. And so I was like, yeah, that's fine. You're totally entitled to that opinion, but you can't afford me. So if you're making any dollars out of it, you'd have to pay me, and you can't afford me. So we carried on doing that. And the other thing that I started, which you come along to as well, Adam, is every Saturday, because I was still working all through COVID, and a lot of us were. I started. I persuaded. Well, the British region contacted me and said, we're not going to be able to hold our board meetings now. Right up until 2019, these guys were having in-person, face-to-face board meetings every month, right? 2-3 hour drives each way to go to a pub, have lunch, and have a board meeting. I mean, it now it's just mental. It was mental then, and it's even more mental when you think about it now, 5 years later. So I was like, so they came to me for some advice about what technology we could use. At the time, Zoom was the big thing, but Zoom was so insecure. The APIs were open. it was a mess, and people were Zoom bombing, and I was like, you can't be using Zoom, use WebEx. So we went down the route of using WebEx, which we still use today. And I was like, well, basically what you've done is you've hired a meeting room. This is what happens when you pay for online meeting software. You effectively rent a meeting room, and it's available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but people use it once a month or once in a blue moon. I was like, we could do this. It's going to cost us $14 a month, and we'll just use it, right? I was like, can I just use it whenever I want, as long as you can use it for your board meetings? And they were like, yeah, sure. So I was like, great. So I set up every Saturday morning. I was like, brewing natter. So like basically a meeting, and they were like, well, what's going to be the agenda? I said, there isn't going to be one. Like, so when I was a teenager, I used to get the train like 3 hours up the road to a little place called Clitheroe in Lancashire. And Clitheroe's famous for sausages, right? And a castle. But it's also used to have a North American model shop that was in a terraced house, and the entire house was the model shop.
Right.
There was G-gauge in the upstairs bedroom. There was the bathroom was upstairs. There was a parlour and a back room, very traditional. Two rooms downstairs, 2 rooms upstairs, and then an extension with a kitchen. Right. The kitchen had no units and cupboards in it. It had a sink hanging off the wall, which had some uprights and a shelf underneath, which all the cups were there.
Yep.
There was a kettle sitting on the metal drainer of the sink, right? Electrical to water, but whatever. And there was an old freestanding electric 1960s 4-ring hob, right? And at one point, before we invested in the electric kettle, it was a whistling kettle on the hob.
Yep.
And there was a table, like 1950s rickety table, and a couple and dining chairs arranged in this kitchen, and that was kind of like the brew room. And you'd go in there, and I'd go up as a 14-year-old. It'd be full of NMRA members every Saturday. And you only open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Every Saturday morning, get off. I'd been on that first train in the morning, because in the UK on a Saturday it's off-peak fare all day. Yep. So I'd get the first train in the morning, get straight up to Clitheroe, go in the model shop, sit at the back. There's a guy called Terry Wynn, who was the Rapido Rapido rep in the UK before Rapido UK became a thing. He's been a modeler for years, really big mentor of mine, and a few other people that are no longer with us. And we just sit in the back of the shop on a Saturday morning and talk about trains. I learned so much about model trains and railroads in America from just sitting in that shop. And then we'd have a route, like downstairs underneath the kitchen was a cellar, and that's where all the HO was. Just mountains of Affirm Blue Box kits, Affirm Blue Box locomotives, and there was a layout down there as a test track, and we just run, if we wanted to, we'd just run trains. You just get anything you wanted off the shelf, get it out the box, put it down, and run it around. As long as you put it back in the box, no one cared. And we did all that, ran trains around, great. And there was all brass models upstairs in the main bit. It was awesome, absolutely awesome, right? And so it's like we could recreate that. It was because, Saturday morning, couple of hours, sit and talk about trains. No agenda, no clinics, nothing like that. Not a division meeting, just guys sitting down, chewing the fat, sharing interest. So we did that, and then I started talking to your guys in Queensland, just in a few mornings and different things, early in the morning before I was at work, when you guys used to have op sessions and stuff. Now everyone was locked down, even in Australia, so you were having just chats and things. That's how I met all you guys, and so you guys started coming to Brew and Natter. So now that's continued now 5 years later. But what those things then helped me do is people suddenly realised who I was, and I kind of realised, actually, I've got some good ideas here. National's not done very much for a very long time. I need to drag this kicking and screaming, because of the level of resistance, to be honest, to what I was doing giving my volunteer time for that was benefit people, surprised me quite a lot.
Really?
On those I mean, on those early pre-NMRA, I think in 2019 about 6 hours of video on the YouTube site was watched on the NMRA's YouTube site. By the end of 2020, it was 350,000 hours of views.
Yep.
Right, and
Quite
hundreds of thousands of different users. It was tens of thousands, maybe not hundreds of thousands, but tens of thousands of different users. Suddenly, the NMRA Facebook group went from 13,500 members to 22,000 members in the space of 12 months. It was like, this is, whilst they might not be joining the organisation, this is where we need to go. Like, we have to modernise this organisation, or it's going to.
By doing that, they're interacting with the organisation. They may not be joining, but they're more aware of it, and you've got a better chance of them joining. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. Totally. And it's not all it was doing. And then what I realised is all I'm doing is recreating what I did as a teenager, now as an adult, in a different way, delivered through a different medium. But it's the same principle. These things don't go away. Right? There's the business side of what the NMRA does, and then there's the social side. It's like the family business. Every mob business, right? At some point in any gangster film, not that saying the NMRA is a gangster, but in any kind of film, they always end up going for a meal, ended up in some seedy Italian restaurant, right? That's the social side of the NMRA. It's a family business. There's the business side. There's the social side. The social side is important, and you've got to look after the family, and the business takes care of itself. That's basically the principle. So, in 2021, Jack Hamilton was the large worldwide director who'd beaten me in the 2019 election cycle. He got ill, and his wife told him he had to stop being a director. He's still a member of the NMRA, still very active in his region, but he had to stop being a national director. So I was invited then by the then president, Pete Magoon, to step up and become the large worldwide director. Now, it was known at the time that I'd been approached by a number of people and I'd been asked, would I run as the president? And I said I would only do it if they put the advert out and no one applied to be on the ballot, which is exactly what happened. So they put the nominations out, not a single person put their name forward, so I did. The second time it went out, right? And so he then contacted me and said, look, you obviously want to be on the board. You come on the board as the large worldwide director and forget this president nonsense. So it was a deliberate attempt to get me to see out another year of that directorship. And then likelihood was somebody else would be elected into that role. It wouldn't be me re-elected. Okay. So I said, I'll do it, but not on the basis that I then don't run for president, because I actually think I could do some good here. Yeah. And I'm glad that I did that, because the easy option would have been to just say, hey, yeah, that's what I want. But it's not what I wanted. What I wanted was I wanted to help the organisation be better, and that kind of there's two sides to the running of the organisation. The NMRA directors make strategic decisions, but the operational day-to-day, the delivery of how we deliver programming, what the organisation does, sits under the president in the officers' side of the camp. So myself, the vice president, the secretary, and the treasurer, and that's why I wanted to be the president. And originally I was going to be vice president. I put my name forward for vice president, but no one stepped up to be president. So I said, well, I'll do that. And Rick Coble, who was then the secretary, said, well, I'll run as vice president. So I was then elected as the president, already been on the board for 6 months, which was eye-opening. 6-hour meetings. It was just people sitting there in board meetings reading out reports that they'd already submitted. So I then became the president, did away with all of that. So there is now not, in that first 12 months was hard, because what I inherited was an organisation that had lost 1,700 members in the first year of COVID, despite us increasing all of that activity. We'd still managed to lose 1,700 members in a year, which is just unsustainable completely. And all the people, I have had to replace every single department head that was a volunteer in the organisation. Right. Since I became president. And I replaced everybody with younger people. So there's a new head of education, new S&C chair, Andy Zimmerman, who's awesome. Speed came in as the IT director from the NMRA team. Brought in Riley as publications, with Riley having an understanding of what the internet was, which helped, whereas our previous head of publications was nearly 90. So brought all that in. And then that was it. So I changed the way that they do the board meetings. So I said, right, you submit these reports, you read them before the meeting, you ask each other questions, and then when we get to the meeting, it's just any other questions that arise from the reports. Otherwise, reports are taken as read, accepted, done. Shaved off 6 hours off the meeting. That meant the board meetings went from 2 days to 1 day immediately. And the first 3 board meetings that I did were done in under 2 hours.
And this once a month meetings, yeah?
These are done twice a year, but they were still done under 2 hours. When I went to the one in 2018, it took 2 days.
Right.
So we just completely changed the way that we run the organisation, because if you don't want, if you want to change a culture, it has to change at the top.
Yeah.
So if you want the organisation to be more efficient, more modern, and use the tools that are around it, and be respectful of people's voluntary time, then you have to show it from the very top. And that's exactly what we did. So we just turned around and went, this changes, this is how we do it, and we've just continually tried to do that. So it's a business, so it should be run like a business. So there shouldn't be that much difference between what you would see in an NMRA boardroom or an NMRA leadership meeting from any other business boardroom or leadership meeting. That's the biggest difference. But unfortunately, it's not yet fully cascaded down to lower levels in the organisation. So you're still seeing these heavy regions meeting every month, going through the same business. Most don't spend that much money. So they'll sit there in a division meeting and it's, we've had this much out. We've had nothing in, nothing out of the bank account, nothing in. It doesn't need to be done, right? So we're getting there, but it's a journey. And like I've always said to everybody, the NMRA is kind of like a fleet of ships, and you can't just run up. If you just run up a signal and turn your ships, that's how you lose the battle. That's what went wrong for the Germans after Jutland, though they still won that battle. That's what went wrong. That's what went wrong multiple times in the Pacific War. When the Japanese attacked Taffy 3, they ran up a signal to turn around because they thought they saw cruisers, and they all turned around and legged it. By the time they'd realised what was going on, because they'd gone so quick, and realised that actually there was no cruisers, it was too late. They were already sailing back out the way, and that ended up in a massive defeat for the Japanese because the Yanks caught up with them then. So it's so the same principle with like trying to change an organisation is you want to go quickly, but you've also got to go a little bit cautiously and just turn it degree at a time. So but that's what I wanted to do, and I just felt like I was the right person, the right place at the right time, really, and I still do for now.
I will say I like how you snuck in the World War II references there.
Do you like that?
Every conversation you and I have, there's always something about the war. Just gets worked in by either of us. And if I recall last weekend during a brew and natter, I may have made a joke about 1,000 years of something to do with Germans, and you did pull me up and say, "Oh no, we can't mention the war," sort of thing. But
that's the thing, because the British. Well, so there's been so many things that people rightly people don't need to know about. But I don't mind. I'm very transparent, so I don't mind talking about it. But there's been so many things in the NMRA in the last, in 4 years, that people don't realise what goes on behind the scenes to run an organisation of this size. It's a multi-million-dollar annual budget. There's there's 17,000 people worldwide involved, plus all the manufacturers in the world. It's huge. And while I've been the president, the European region ended up folding because they couldn't get enough people to stand in leadership roles to run the region. 4 people.
Really?
Not being political, but just typical Europe. Can't get anyone to step up. So 4 people couldn't get 4 people.
Not being political.
So, well, it's just typical. Unfortunately, it's just endemic of the world. Like, you know, so in our self-interest, it dies back to the whole how dare you do NMRX if you're not making a book out of it.
Yeah.
You know, so we flip that around and we just said, right, well, we'll just reverse Brexit and reabsorb the Europeans into the British region. So when you're on Brew and Natter now, you have people from all over Europe on Brew and Natter, which is great because there's some fantastic modelers in Europe and some really, really clever people that are heavily involved in the development of DCC, of their own European standards. Some of them are not as fine as I wish they were, and compared to the UK standards, but awesome, right? Absolutely awesome. So we reabsorb them, bring them in, and it's just great. I love it. I love what we're doing, especially this kind of Commonwealth. It doesn't work very well for the Canadians, that Brew and Natter on a morning, because of the time zone thing, but it works really well that it's Saturday morning in the UK, it's Saturday evening in Australia and New Zealand. We invite the Aussies to come along to it, and it's kind of like a Commonwealth meeting with a few Americans thrown in for seasoning, and it's awesome. It's a great stewing pot of ideas and experience. So
Kind of rebuilding the empire on a small scale.
Yeah, well, there's only there's 22 countries left that we've not invaded. So
pick your game up, mate. So I can say
there's 22 countries in the world that the Brits have not invaded at some point in history. So, there's only 22 left. We're working on it.
Yeah, give it time. It's
give it time.
So when I started to get to know you, I was fascinated by the little things you do for just taking the piss. Like where you'd be over there in the States wearing a kilt, right? And then you'd have a shirt which was, Make America Great Britain Again. And I'm thinking, how are you not in Dealey Plaza getting a ventilated head? Like it's just, I just look at it and say, you're the first president that's not from America Town, right, of an American organisation, and then you throw in that you do these things just to take the mickey and have fun with it, which some Americans I've met are actually really good at taking the mickey out of themselves, but the stereotype is that they're not.
No, see, that's the thing, and it's the thing with politics and stuff. Like, there's national politics and then there's real people, and there are some fantastic. The one thing about our hobby that makes it, in my opinion, unique is that it's not competitive. It's a community of people with mutual interests that are all geeks, and let's be honest, it's not always been cool. It is a bit cool now, right?
Yeah,
it's cool to be a geek at the minute, right? But it's not, because of TikTok and all that kind of stuff. It's cool to be into technology. It's cool to be a geek. When I was at school, when you were at school, and when most of our members were at school, you didn't openly admit to being a model railroader, certainly in the 80s and 90s, because you would have been branded as like Sheldon Cooper, although Bang Theory didn't exist. And, so it's that community, I think what that then fosters from a kind of the group of all the unpopular kids at school get together, right? And have this secret hobby, is that everyone's really willing to share.
Yeah.
There's not many in the US. There are not many There are not many. I don't know. So model railroaders in the US can just walk into another model railroader's house and not get shot.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thing when you've got Florida has the stand your ground rules. You walk in through my front door and I can shoot you because I think you might be trying to rob me, with no other evidence than you walk through my front door, right? Stand your ground laws, and yet, as model railroaders, we do that all the time.
Yeah,
and people welcome people into their homes, and they'll find out that you're in town, and not just because I'm the president of the NMRA. This has always happened. I've been going to the US since 2014. You just go in there and people are like, oh yeah, you're interested in the same thing that I am, even if it's not the same railroad or the same scale or the same era. But you're a geek too. And yeah, exactly. And that's what I love about the hobby and about the people in it. But you've got to have a bit of banter. You've got to know who you can do it with. Not everybody. Yeah. Some people have a sense of humour failure. I have sense of humour failure sometimes, but yeah, you've got to keep it going, having a bit of banter. Certainly, if you are involved in manufacturing like my family was, you know that there's always banter between the manufacturers.
Yeah.
Like the time when the guy built my dad's kit and glued the conrods on the locomotive wheels and then didn't say anything and gave it to Pico to test it on the big test track at the big O-scale show in the UK, and the conrods fell off my dad's brand new release. Can you imagine, like, Athern or Scale Trains or Oscision having a steam locomotive there, a brand new thing that everyone's been waiting for, putting it on a test track with 300 people watching it and the conrods fall off? Like, hilarious, absolutely hilarious. My dad was hopping mad, but everyone else was pissing themselves. It was hilarious, and you've got to have that kind of, you've got to have that banter and that bit of enjoyment, right? It's otherwise it just becomes too stale.
Hey, Alex.
There you have to edit that out now. So there we go. That's it. So chaos. So yeah, that's kind of where were we? Oh, that's where we were now. Yeah. So that old banter. So that's, you know, that's kind of how it is.
But
yeah, that's kind of how I was brought up. There was always banter going on. Like, everybody had a nickname when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like the guy that machined the conrods for us was from Liverpool.
Mm.
He'd done his apprenticeship in Crewe Locomotive Works as a machinist. Very, very competent machinist. His wife worked for the police.
Mm-hmm.
And he was from Liverpool. And everybody knows that Liverpool's full of criminals. And so he was known as Billy the Bandit. Right? Just that was his nickname. Everybody in the hobby knew him as Billy the Bandit. And then there was the guy who used to drive my dad everywhere, because my dad would go to train shows, right? And then come 11 o'clock in the morning when the pubs opened, and back right up until the early 2000s, pubs in the UK were on the same opening rules as they were in World War I. So there you go, another war reference. Which meant the pub could open between 3 o'clock and 7. 3 o'clock, was it 3 o'clock and 7 or something? No, 11 o'clock and 3. 11 and 3,
mm-hmm.
and then they could reopen at 7 till 11. And most pubs, some pubs were allowed that middle shift, the barmaid middle shift between 3 and 7, but most were 11 till 3 and then 7 till 11. Right, when I was growing up. So my dad wouldn't miss his afternoon drinking on a Saturday because of a train show. He'd be there at the start of the train show. Come 11 o'clock when the bar opened, and for some reason every single venue back in the 90s still had a pub in it, had a bar, a place that sold alcohol. It's not very common anymore because of the drink driving rules, but back then, even though there was drink driving rules, it was much more common. So my dad would be in the pub. Come 11 o'clock, he would take the cash register for the stand and go to the pub. And if you wanted to buy a kit from us, you had to go and find my dad in the pub. And then he had a thing where he'd buy you a pint and he'd give you a 25% off voucher to come back to the stand. To buy a coach to go with your locomotive. So now you buy a brass passenger car kit off us for 50 quid. That's $50, right? Imagine a brass passenger coach, O-scale 2 rail for $50. But of course, you had to then go back to the bar to pay.
Yeah.
You couldn't pay at the stand. So back you went again. Now we got you another pint. And this went on and on and on all day long. My dad buying people pints.
So everyone, especially your dad, is just getting pissed.
Yeah. And then my dad had this. Yeah, but my dad had it all sorted out, right? Because what he'd do is he went to the bakery and got meat and potato pies.
Yep.
And we had trays of cold meat and potato pies under the table. And if you'd bought a locomotive and a passenger car kit, and this is me as an 8-year-old getting taught this, and you were a bit unsteady, bearing in mind that most of our flipping customers were in their 70s, so they were always unsteady, but now they're 2 pints in, you had to give them a pie. Or someone would come over and they might not have bought anything, they were half a gallon in the bar, and my dad would send them down to us, and they'd say, your dad told me to ask you for a pie, like they're asking for drugs or something. Like, Dad told me to ask you for a pie, because you got all concession stands in these exhibition centres and stuff, and I'd be there with a pie, like passing pies over the stand. It was hilarious. Imagine, we were like the scale trains of O-scale trains back in the 90s. We sold the business to Pete Waterman in 2001, so we were like, a reasonably big manufacturer. We had 20 locomotive brass kits in our range and over 100 passenger cars. It was a big, massive range of stuff that we kept in. Pie. There'd be 5. We got to Manchester Model Railway show when I was a kid. It was always the first weekend in December, so it was really the start of the Christmas holidays. And it was a weird show, Adam, because it started on Friday night.
Right.
So it was in the city centre of Manchester, across from the main railway station. So imagine being in Brisbane, main railway station in Brisbane, and the building directly outside the main railway station was in the basement of that was where the train show was.
Yep.
And Friday night, 7 o'clock, the doors opened. It opened to advanced ticket holders at 5 o'clock, 5:30. But 7 o'clock, the doors opened. And it ran till the bar in the building shut. So about 10 o'clock, about 10 o'clock at night, and the bar would stay open for an hour afterwards. And then everyone would leg it round the corner to the Crown and Cushion, which was a pub used by railwaymen, and the printers, because my dad worked as a printer round the corner printing the Daily Mail, and they all were in there drinking, and then the newspaper trains went out at 11:30 to 3 o'clock in the morning, all over the country, out of the station from across the thing. So the show started on a Friday night, and loads of people. No one lived in the city centre of Manchester in the 90s. Everybody worked there. Yeah. Now it's been rebuilt, and it's all kind of a bit more people living there. But back then it was all offices. So everyone had come to the train show. So my dad never got behind the stand on a Friday night. He was in the bar the whole time, and it was awesome. But we got to the Manchester show, and we'd have all these pies under the stand, and we'd be giving pies out all the time, and it was absolutely brilliant. So that was kind of my education of growing up in trains. So I've always been around it, but every single person had a nickname.
See,
everyone.
That's an interesting
single person.
Well, there's a couple interesting things you've said there to me which really resonate. So the nicknames, the pies, and most importantly, the shop in the house, right? Where you're going in that.
Right.
So everyone in my age group and older in Australia has a story about a shop that was, a little shop that was only open a few days a week, but of a night time, it was like this secret little enclave where people would just disappear inside a door, and lots of coffee and foul language would be consumed and exchanged. And it was just, and I had my eyes open to this when I was 8 by my dad. He took me to J&J Hobbies, which was very much the same. It was this little shop tucked out of the way on the side of an intersection of 2 very busy roads, that it was a nightmare to get to this shop just because of how busy the roads were. And it just, you'd go in and it was a different world. And that's kind of what you're describing, in that you'd just go there and you'd walk out having bought 500 things that you hadn't anticipated buying, right? And having learnt a hell of a lot, made new mates, and you had the social side of the hobby. And that was the thing that I got very, very interested in. And it fascinates me to hear you say basically the same sort of thing. And everyone I talk to has a story like that. And we don't really have that these days, do we?
No. No, we just don't.
The closest we've got is things like the Brew and Natter or the Chat I Run and these things now, but they're only new really when you look at it. And like you mentioned before about guys just sitting looking at 4 walls. And yeah, it seems like we are starting, maybe, hopefully, touch wood, to get back to the stage of people having fun and actually interacting and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think people realise how serious loneliness is.
Mm.
You didn't think you were going there with this conversation, did you, when you started this? I don't think people realise how serious loneliness is in older people, especially male older men.
Yeah.
Older people in general that live on their own. But it used to be a thing of a lot of older ladies back in the day because their husbands had died or whatever. But now there's so many divorced men in the world. It's just a generic thing with older people. Is loneliness, and it kills. Loneliness is the biggest killer of older people. Not disease.
And it's not even older people now as well these days. That's true. Age bracket is getting earlier and earlier, and
yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. We've got a lot of people who you would say in our hobby never used to be diagnosed as being on the spectrum, but are on the spectrum, and they tend to be very introverted, very lonely, but they're happy with that. But like, there's so much more you can get out of your hobby by engaging with other people, and you can learn. Like, you can learn, and you can share, and you can develop and do and work together. Like, I've done all kinds. I learned so many different things. Me and you with your track, pointing in the right direction. If we'd not had a few conversations about that, and I'd not put you onto a couple of people that were in my network, we would never have Wuiske Models Flex Track. Or if we had, it would have taken a lot longer, and we'd have made a lot more mistakes on the way of getting it done. Than we did. And then, right now, I've just got a drawing up actually that I'm working on while we're talking to do. A friend of mine, Hannah, she's manufactures N-scale laser buildings, and she wants to do a bank. And she came with us to Glasgow, was on the stand with me, and said, "Oh, do you mind if I'll come and help on the NMRA stand? But do you mind if I do a bit of work?" I said, "People are going to love watching you draw a building. Like, people love it. Like, how on earth does this thing go from idea to kit? People just love learning that. Like, they'll love it. Just do it. It's fine." And while I was doing it, she said, one thing I've always wanted to build a kit of is a bank. But the problem with banks is columns. Most banks have, in America especially, have columns. Older buildings have columns at the front, and you can't laser cut a column. Right? It just don't work. It does not work. Right? So I said, well, why don't I just 3D print you a column? So I've drawn up the column. I've now got a conical, so it's a conical column thinner at the top than the bottom, which is how they would be on a bank. And I've done that, and now I'm just going to do a fluted one for her, and I'll just throw through the printer 200 or 300 of these that's just a couple of prints. That's a couple of, set it up and do it once, and because they're about 2 mil diameter or 4 mil diameter, something like that. They're tiny, and that's what goes on really behind the scenes in the hobby. That's what I love about this hobby. When you actually get out of your own basement or out of your mama's house, right, and actually do a bit, and engage. There's so much you can learn from each other. Nobody knows everything. But, we work together, and it's amazing when you end up on these chats like the Brew and Natter chat or your guys in Australia, where the conversation ends up going. Me and you rightly joke, don't we, that we always end up spending money every time we have one of these conversations.
Well, what did I buy that was completely your fault? It was a 3D printer, wasn't it? It was the Elegoo Saturn that I bought.
Oh, did you buy a 3D printer? Yeah.
Yeah, that was your fault. I bought a laser cutter the other week, which is sitting in the next room, which I've got to open. That's sort of on the agenda for this weekend. And there has been a lot of things. The only one I've resisted going down the road of is Marty and his radio control stuff, because that's just dangerous. But I have found that the NMRA is one of these funny things that I never joined. I was kind of semi-involved in it, in a way, locally, without being part of it. And I never wanted to join because, being a manufacturer, I'd had clubs that would say, "Oh, you should join," and this and that and the other. And then you talk to all the people about how this guy's an arsehole and this guy, and just the politics. And I was just, no, stay away. I don't want to know. We can talk trains, talk about whatever you want. We can talk about the war, right? But I don't want to know about the politics. It's none of my business, and I don't wish to make it so. And then I did an NMRA convention down the Gold Coast, and I met Laurie McLean, right? Which I know that there's varying opinions of Laurie, but I actually really like Laurie quite a lot. because here's this guy, just an insane model maker. Like, the stuff he does was just bonkers, and there was no ego about him, and he'd start telling me, oh yeah, I just did this and this and da 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 da. He was just showing me how he did it, and there was no secret squirrel stuff like I had encountered with other people in other groups, and I really liked that. So, I was there obviously to sell, and I wasn't giving out pies, but it was just a case of I was there to sell, but instead I was, bugger that, I was learning instead, and I had an absolute ball. And that was where I started looking at the NMRA and going, oh, hang on, I like this group, it's a bit different. And then through yourself and Marty, I got involved in the NMRAX a little bit with a couple of things there and the chat that you were doing with it, and I really enjoyed it. And then, it's sort of, there was Andy over in the States, whom got the nickname from myself and my ex-wife, Chucky, because he sounds like Chucky from Rugrats, which I was a bit worried about telling him, but radio, but it's true. And he was hosting the chat that you used to do, wasn't he? He'd set that all up.
Yeah, with the YouTube model builders, yeah.
Yeah.
The YouTube guys, yeah.
And
that was pre-COVID. I mean, he was doing that pre-COVID. I think a lot of this stuff was going on, but it was just on a small scale.
Yeah.
And then COVID kind of just, I don't know, just exposed everyone's knowledge of it.
Now, I should point
because people were seeking it out.
I should point out here, for the benefit of the 2 or 3 people watching this, that whom are very bored, that Gordy's not actually watching midget porn at the moment. Potentially, he claims he's working on CAD. Is that correct?
I am working on CAD. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not CAD.
I am trying to work out. Pardon?
What do you use? You don't use CAD, do you?
No, I use Fusion 360.
So
what I'm trying to do right now is make a fluted column.
Yeah, that's easy.
Is it?
Well, okay, it's easy the way I would do it, as someone who doesn't do techie stuff but still muddles his way through.
So this is, so what I've done is I have drawn a circle.
Yep.
Then I have added, I haven't been counting, that was silly of me, 10 smaller circles.
Yep.
Around the diameter of it, and I'm about to carve out the inside shape of that, which will give me a fluted shape when I draw it.
So there's 2 ways I would do that, and again, bear in mind I'm using AutoCAD, which is an older version of Fusion, right? It's a different way though. But what I would do is either draw the circle, then draw the 10 circles you've mentioned, right? Subtract them from that circle, so that gives you the overall shape, and then you would draw a line up the vertical line up the center point, and then extrude it up, but using the not loft function. I'm trying to remember the function. I was telling you about it a month or 2 ago, where you can set it so that it will actually. You'd then put a smaller circle at the top, and it would just extrude it, but with the taper on.
We'll work it out between the two. That's pretty much where I would be going with this.
The other option is draw a circle, extrude it to the height you want, just say 50 mil. All right, extrude it to 50 mil so it's just a straight rod. Put a chamfer on it. So this is the way I would have done it before I learnt about those functions. Put a chamfer of 50 mil by, say, I don't know, 0.5 or whatever on it. So there's your tapered column, and then I would measure the angle of that edge, and then just draw the 10 rods that you want to subtract from it, rotate them to that angle, position 1 where you want it, and then revolve. Use the revolve function to copy it around, and then subtract them. So
that's almost where we're at right now. So, sorry, I've drawn this thing, and yeah. It's where you don't know where these things. This is what I mean. You don't know where conversations are going to go.
Yeah, but I like that. I thoroughly
just got to.
So
Yeah, and that's what this is all about. I mean, that's what, model trains should be about. There's no competition, right? There's no we gain nothing by competing.
Yes.
And people think the manufacturers compete with each other. They don't, because you gain nothing from doing that either.
Well, I would say, I know in Australia they do compete with each other, but they do it at their own stupidity. Right.
Yeah, I mean, they don't intentionally. No one intentionally goes, "Oh, you know what? I'm gonna deliberately make the same train as soon as they find out somebody else is doing it," because the development time to the point at which you can make an announcement and have the product on the shelf at the same time, they're already going to be months ahead of you. So you'd have to work day and night to catch back up. What's the point? Who would do that? So these generally end up being, by fluke that these things happen. Not always, but.
I do know of a couple that were deliberate and quite nasty, but it is generally, yes, it is by fluke. And radio, they do sometimes cause a bit of ire between the manufacturers, but as you well know. But the reality is, it's just the nature of the game. I personally think that as a manufacturer, that you should try and be open with each other as to what you're working on. I'm very much alone in that because everyone likes to do the secret squirrel stuff. But I like that idea because then, I make this, you make this, and one complements the other rather than competing with the other. And the risk of is just, And so, radio. But, we always come to that stumbling block of people don't like to talk about what they're working on, which... Yeah, I like doing surprise releases, but I don't. I wish that you could discuss it more and sort of get more feedback prior to doing things and all of that, just to see what people want and to go from there.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So so you becoming president was a deliberate. I'm going to use the word plot, but it was. You sort of accidentally fell into going down that path.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So, how did you get into modelling American though instead of British?
Well, that's a good question. So, I got into modelling American because my dad modelled British stuff, and he had all these British models, but I wasn't allowed to touch them because they effectively were stock.
Yeah.
Right, and the last thing you want is an 8-year-old to drop a brass coach on its end when you want to put it on display to sell your product. Yeah. So I wasn't allowed to touch it, and my dad wasn't very good at. He never spent any time teaching us how to model or anything like that. But his friends would, either because they were just nice people, or I don't know, maybe they thought it would win some favour with him or something. But my dad's friends would, and one of his friends, who I still phone up to this day, and talk to, was interested in modelling American stuff. And my dad worked. Being a manufacturer of trains generally involves you having a full-time job to pay for it.
Yeah.
And so he was working as a port health officer on the Manchester Ship Canal, and he would have to work weekends on call. Mm-hmm. And my mum and dad divorced when I was 6. My brother, I've got an identical twin. He lived with my mum. I lived with my dad. And my dad used to work on the ships on the weekends, and because he was on call, but on call meant in work. Mm-hmm. Ships are a 7-day business, so I'd have to be looked after by different people. Mm-hmm. And my dad's friend Phil, or better known as Alf, would take me to the NMRA meeting with him. Mm-hmm. Once a month when it was that, and a few other times I would go get on the train from school, right, go towards Chester, mm-hmm. walk through the fields for 2 miles from this station to go and operate on a Friday night this British O-scale layout that was 450 feet long across 5 sheds in someone's garden, and it was run like the real thing with absolute block signalling, full interlocking, everything, 4-track main line. And I ran one of the stations. It was DC block, so you had a person in each station, you had the block instruments and everything. And I did that when I was 14, 15. And then one of the guys who lived in the general direction of where we lived, which was an hour and 20 minutes drive away in Manchester would take me home. So I had that I did, and then on other weekends I would go to the NMRA meet, and this guy said to my dad, basically somehow it ended up as a present. My dad gave him a little bit of money for it. He gave me a Bachmann 70 tonner, and so now I had my own locomotive, and somehow along the way I ended up with this caboose that was an American Model Builders SP caboose with full-on sprung KD trucks. The thing is amazing. I've still got it somewhere, and I ended up paying like a £5 for it because it was in an Athern blue box. But it was not an Athern blue box. This was a 50 quid kit back then.
Yeah.
All done, full interior, the works, and my little SP 70 tonner. And every time I'd go, my dad would send me with a £5. And for £4, I could buy another Athern blue box kit.
Yep.
And then we'd come home with it, and on this guy sat down with me at my dad's while my dad made dinner, and he taught me how to build Athern blue box kits, which is the first time an adult had ever sat down with me and shown me how to do anything modelling wise. And so I loved it. And when I went to the NMRA meeting, the NMRA guys would kind of adopt me and teach me stuff and talk to me about stuff, and I'd book in my 15 minutes. It was a DC HO layout. I'd book in my 15 minutes and my train would go around for 15 minutes. I'd be proud as punch watching my train go around. So I'd be there for 4 or 5 hours and I'd get 15 minutes of running my train, but I loved it because I had no layout at home or anything like that. And that's how I got into American trains, just listening to these guys and seeing all the different trains. And I was like, it really wasn't that I was interested in America or North American prototypes. It was just I was allowed to touch it.
Yeah.
Like anything British, not allowed to touch it.
Yeah.
No, it was stock, as in shop stock. So that's how I got interested in it, and because my dad didn't care whether I broke it, he didn't care. It was mine. So, and that just developed on and on and on, and I always had this interest then in American trains. It also probably helped that American trains had KD couplings on, so they worked, as opposed to British things that had these great big loops and hooks at the front that looked awful. It was more scale, it was more realistic, it was different, it was interesting, and there was a layout that we used to go to Manchester Model Railway Club quite a lot. It's 100 years old this year. It's one of the oldest model railway clubs in the world, and it's got its own building. And upstairs in this building used to be a church hall, and upstairs in it they've got an O-scale layout that goes all the way around the room, but you go up a staircase into that because it's on the first floor. Downstairs was where all their exhibition layouts were, and they've got the club room has a classroom, it has a kitchen, classroom, a library that is like a real library.
Yep.
It's not just a load of books stuffed away. It's the only part of the building, one of a few parts of the building that's got carpet, right?
Right. Yeah.
And a workshop, and in the workshop they've got lathes, watchmaking tools, you name it, they've got it. Unbelievable. And then they've got this big main room that's got all the exhibition layouts in it. And the exhibition layouts from Manchester Model Railway Club were up top tier standard. Like Cheetor is 2mm fine scale. Every single thing on it was scratch built. And back in the corner, tucked away, was this American HO layout called Basin Street, which I always stood there, never ran it. It was never operational whenever we went to the club rooms, and my dad would go to the club rooms probably 6 to 10 times a year.
It was American, it was sort of stuck in the back and covered in dust and all of that.
Yeah, but because it was an old club, we had a lot of O-scale customers there, because all the guys tended to do O-scale. And so my dad would go to the club 6 to 10 times a year. We'd be at Manchester Model Railway Club showing off our new products and testing them upstairs and having everybody look at it. Because we didn't have a layout at home growing up, so he had to take the stuff and test it at Manchester Model Railway Club.
Yep.
And he was a cheeky so-and-so because he was never a member. Right? It's just that he had so many customers there, we could just walk in.
Yep.
And I'd always stay downstairs and stare at this American layout, and I absolutely loved it. And the guy that built it was always there as well. He works now for Pete Waterman, building Pete Waterman's massive layouts. And we were at the Manchester Model Railway show, and he came and sat next to me and my dad, this guy, and he said, look, Basin Street's going in skip because we want the space at the club room. Tell your dad he can have it. You can. It's £400 if you want to buy it, which was a lot of money.
Yeah.
Back then, and I was like, Dad, we've got to save this. This is amazing. It was one of the very first DCC layouts ever built to have DCC on it from the start.
So how big
was it? Got it. Pardon?
How big was it?
It's 12 foot by 2 foot with a 4 foot fiddle yard.
Okay. Yep.
So 16 foot total.
Yep.
And it's basically a time saver track plan. And it had screw terminals underneath the control panel to connect into it DCC.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first layout that was made so you could put DCC into it from scratch. And it was made by Merg. The electronics on it was done by one of the founders of Merg, the Model Railway Electronics Group,
mm-hmm.
who now do loads of really technical stuff and have got members all over the world. Mm-hmm. But back then it was a small, tiny thing, that kind of embryonic organisation. It came with a box full of relays that was like a mini computer to run the thing. And it was all DC, and then you threw all the section switches over and you threw a switch underneath and you connected in DCC to it. And unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And I couldn't have let that go in a skip.
Yeah.
It came with a hand-drawn wiring diagrams for this circuitry and stuff. That I've still got it all. It's still sitting in my railway room, all boxed up. And so that's the first time I had a layout at home. I managed to persuade my dad to buy it for me, and I've still got it to this day. I've had it now for 25 years. It's about 45 years old, this layout. It predates DCC as a standard.
Yeah.
Because it was developed at the time DCC was being developed. It's about 45 years old, this layout. Maybe not that old. Maybe probably about 45, because it's mid-80s when it was started.
So is that around the same time that Fleischmann was doing their version of DCC, but it wasn't? And then Hornby had one as well.
It was
who did 01?
That was Hornby.
That was Hornby. And it really went anywhere, but that was the genesis of DCC. Yeah.
So I had that, and that was like the first time I had a layout, right?
Yeah.
As a teenager. So now we had a layout at home, which was awesome, and I've had it ever since, and I've still got it. I'll never get rid of it. I'll never part with it. It's every house move I've ever had. It's come with me. I've always had it. It doesn't live outside in the garage. It lives in the house. It's always been in every house I've ever owned, everywhere I've ever lived. It's been inside the house to protect it, right? So it's still there now. Best 15 birthday present ever. Still sitting there. Still got it, right? And it's been to some shows with me and stuff like that. So that's kind of why I got into the American, because I was allowed to touch it.
Yeah.
The British stuff I was never allowed to touch. And I remember on my 16th birthday, my dad finally gave me a model, a British one, and the box fell apart in my hand that it was in, and it fell 2 minutes. I had it on the floor, brass model, bashed to bits.
Right.
So, and that kind of proved his point that I should never have been allowed these British models. I was like, typical. I took the lid off the box and the bottom of the box fell out. It was not my fault at all. The box was knackered.
But to your father, it was your fault, and it just demonstrated it just proved everything he'd always sort of thought. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely right. So that's why the North American. And if it wasn't for those guys when I was a teenager being so open to me, and think how influential that was. Like, I've been in the model railway world since I was 4 or 5 year old.
Yeah.
Not allowed to touch anything. Very strictly, you can look, but you can't touch. You can watch. I'd operated some of the best O-scale layouts in the country. From this picture to me operating from being younger than my children are now, and they can't operate like I could at their age. But I'd never been allowed to touch the models. Even if they derailed, I couldn't re-rail them. It was very, very strict in terms of what I could and couldn't touch. I couldn't possibly have my own tools and do any modelling. I was only taught about running the trains, and I wasn't taught about doing any modelling because other people did that for my dad. So he never did anything at home. So it was that, and that was very, very influential, and that's why I always had a soft spot for the NMRA and was always, kind of involved, and I've always wanted to give that back, because if that had not happened, none of this would happen now.
Yeah.
I guarantee it. Trains would have still been part of my life. I probably still would have had a few trains even now, but I wouldn't have been as involved. I wouldn't have even known the NMRA existed, and I wouldn't have been as involved. I might have gone to a few train shows, might have watched a few train videos, but I don't think I would have continued my involvement or increased my involvement in the hobby as much. So that's what people don't realise. Like, literally, that just putting a throttle in somebody's hand, that's giving a bit of time to somebody else, can have a massive impact on them.
Yeah.
Like, longer term.
Yeah, it's
and the same with people like the people of Culpie, like coming seeing your model railway. Like. It's not normal. You're opening your doors, and it's that freeness of giving that's in the hobby. Has a huge impact on people.
It fascinates me though when you look at these little things that potentially are bad things in a way. Some of them, when you're a kid, what they lead to, which is actually very good. And I've been told that you have your detractors and all of that is about you and your presidency and all of that, which I haven't actually seen. I'm very curious. I want to meet one of these people. But
get them on the podcast.
I really do want to meet them and just go, why? Like, look at what he's done. Because I think
you've got to meet these people and go, what have you done?
Well, heaven forbid you ever ask that question, because look, you've been in the industry and all of that, and yourself and through your father and then through NMRA and all of that, and the same as I have. And yeah, the detractors, the ones who are the most vocal about how crap you are always the ones who've done absolutely nothing. Right? And they will only ever do nothing. And it's like on the chat, on my one, you've met Bobby Glendenning.
Yeah, Bobby.
And you've met him over in the States too, right? Now, I love Bobby. He's the nicest guy, right? Just the nicest guy. And as you were talking before, just so giving of his time and his knowledge and everything else. And he was showing me the Sipping and Switching Society that he's a member of in is it North Carolina? And
yeah, they're in the South, yeah.
Yeah, it just, looking at what he's doing, and it's just, this bunch of guys, they haven't got layouts, they've just got modules, and they get together and they just hire a venue, which costs 4/5 of bugger all over there, because, their local government or whatever isn't quite as greedy as ours are here in Australia and potentially in the UK. And so, it's like $500 to hire this venue, and they've got 50 people, so it's $10 a head for a whole weekend, and they just go and they set up all of these modules, like 100 modules, to have these mammoth layouts. They just go and play. They play trains. They sleep under the layout. Some of them in hotels, but seldom. And then they pack up and they go home. And it's so well organised, and there's no infighting and all of that. And I remember talking to Bobby, and I was going, man, I really love this. And we started discussing it, and I was getting all the standards and everything that they're set to. So they basically were doing the Fremo thing, but they got annoyed with the politics and they became their own group to get away from that, which, fair enough.
Fancy that.
Yeah, I know you're shocked, I can tell. And I thought, we should do this in Australia, right? And all the people in the Webby chat that I run were like, yeah, I'll be in that. And so there was about a dozen of us, and we were all going, yeah, I'm doing that. We'll do it. Let's do it. You started out, and we'll join in, and get all the details, and we'll just copy what they do, right? Just we'll do it to narrow gauge and standard gauge and this and that and the other, right? Yeah. And it lasted for about 2 weeks until we put it out there and decided, well, why don't we just mention it to other people? And then it began. There was a guy who was trying to create an Australian Freemo thing. He's been doing it. I found records on bloody forums and all of that, going back 12 years of him arguing standards and this and that and the other. And I looked at it and I just went, this is ridiculous. If you actually look at what's written, 12 years of them arguing over, oh no, it should be 2 millimeters to the left. It's just shut up and build something. And it just, I was looking at it, it was just so ridiculous. But yeah, but I like the way that these American groups have done things and the way that they just set it up, they just work together and they do it. Which
there's a lot we can. There's a lot. This is what I'm saying. There's a lot we can learn from each other.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what the internet and the NMRA does. That's what it's all about.
Mm.
It's about sharing, and once you share, you learn all this stuff, and you didn't even realize existed.
Mm.
I guarantee it. You know, but anyway, it is what it is, and in terms of the organisation, it is a lot of good goes on in the organisation. Replicating it and making it spread is always the challenge, you know, because you've got this one good idea. So some things don't work and don't translate, but you've got this one good idea. I like the sipping and switching. I like the fact that it goes together really quick, but I prefer Freemo because there is some rigidity with sipping and switching. But it doesn't matter because I don't have to get involved in sipping and switching.
Yeah.
What I have to do is enable and empower them to recruit as many people as they want to do that as possible and facilitate them doing it. That is my role in the hobby. That's my job. That's the NMRA's job. That's why people go, oh, I'm not NMRA, I'm RPM. That's my favourite one. This is this railroad prototype modelers in the US. That is my favourite line that anyone says to me because I go, okay, but with the exception of I think one event in the US, the NMRA provides the insurance for every single RPM meet. And in the US, insurance is important. You can't rent a venue without liability insurance. It's expensive. So the NMRA provides it. Like, again, empowering and enabling. That's all it's about, right? Yeah, like, don't be an arsehole. So I can't believe we just talked like that for 45 minutes about that meandering and not answered the question, which was about, you know, getting away with taking the piss. But yeah, that's what it's all about. Like don't be in Scotland. They have a saying like, "Don't be a dick."
I was about to say, "Don't be a dick."
You know,
I actually set up when I set up the Queensland Modelers Group on Faceplane. That was purely and simply because there was an Australian group that had started up, and I was one of the founding admins on it, which I was a useless admin, right? Because I don't care, right? If you want to argue with someone, argue with them. I don't give a rat's, you know, and all of that. It's just when it gets to the point where you call someone a Nazi, then it's like, right, you're an idiot, go away, right? And things like that. You know, where it hits that point. But yeah, and so that group became so insanely political, and in the end, and I raised this with all the admins, because they had about 18 admins, right? Just because everyone needed a power trip. And it's like, you do realise you're all the kings of nothing. It's a group about trains on Das Interweb. No one cares. Oh, no, you're belittling us and this and that. It's like, no. Right? And then in the end, I set up the Queensland Modelers Group. And the basic rule was, as you said, don't be a dick. Right? And
it's not difficult, is it?
It's really not, and we don't get problems. And we've got 1,500, 2,000 members or something, and we don't really get problems, right? I did get one a while ago. A guy sent me, he screenshotted someone's post and said, "I find this offensive. I think you need to step in, Adam," and all of that. And I just wrote back and said, "Have you always been this much of a whinger?" And then nothing more was. I said, if you don't like it, cool. So tell him you don't like it. He might care, he might not. That's his opinion, the same as you're expressing your opinion to me now. Like, who cares? But but
exactly.
I've
You're
never
entitled to that opinion.
I've never heard of this RPM thing. I think I've heard you mention it, but I've never actually found out what it was.
Yeah, it's basically just people that like. So the difference is, people don't right. So in the NMRA traditionally very contest heavy, competing with each other whenever you display a model. I personally hate that,
Yep.
and I think a lot of people do, because the only person I compete against with my modelling is myself.
Yep.
Right. I have no interest. I have no interest. I've yet to find somebody who wants to make the exact same model as me. And when I mean exact same model, I mean the same wagon, the same number, same type, same load, same minute of the same day. I've never found that, right? I'm sure you've not either. I've never literally had somebody that wants to model wagon 1234 on the 4th of July at 12 o'clock whilst it was being loaded with cattle and daisies just shot down the side of it, right?
And
nobody wants to do that. In which case, there's no level competing playing field, right? So the only person you're competing with in the hobby is yourself. But that's been the traditional view. It's very entrenched in the US. So there are guys that are proud Rivet counters who want to make that model of wagon or freight car 1234 on the 4th of July at 12 o'clock as Daisy shat down the side of it, and they will quite happily have a picture of Daisy shatting down the side of it and model that and weather it in exactly that way. Outstanding, right? Because everybody knows if you've got a cattle wagon and you don't put some yellow in on it for the urea for weathering it, then it's not realistic, right? Because people have looked at black and white photographs and worked all that out. So anyway, this RPM group set up, and what they do is they lay out tables, they put their models on tables, and they'll have a description of the model, and they just like talking about what they've done, which is outstanding. I think it's great. But they are absolute rivet counters with it. So be prepared. They kind of had a don't be a dick rule. You don't say to somebody, oh, well, I think that adds 10 more rivets, because those guys love getting into that conversation, but they don't criticize each other's modeling, which is great. In theory, they don't criticize each other's modeling, and it's great. And their level of clinic at RPM is, I've been to them, they are right up there, top level clinics. It's not a case of here's how to operate your layout. It's like, here is how the railroad moved this freight on this day in this era, this cars, this is how they modified it. It's like the level of detail is way up there, and it's really good. If you're into that kind of thing, it's really, really good. The standard of modeling is really, really high. It's intimidating, though, to any kind of anyone who's below a kind of intermediate level modeler. Yep. Somebody turning up there that's built their first 4-walled structure is going to be intimidated. There's very few people there that shake a box and put it out on a table. So it's very intimidating to a lot of people, but it's a really great way to learn and enhance your skills, because people will give you the time of day to explain what they're doing.
Okay.
So it's not a train show. It's like, here, let me show you my models, let me explain to you what I'm doing.
To lift your game and do more yourself.
Yeah. And in your journey of being a model railroader or a railway modeler, you'll get to that level at some point that's kind of what you want to be, and that's what you want to do. Like, the 2-foot rule is okay for everybody, especially if you're making a 260 million square foot layout in a shed. But if you're not, and you just want a freight car on display, and a lot of them are younger guys.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of people in their 20s and 30s involved in RPM who don't have room for layouts at home, and they've come from rail fanning, and they want to make a replica of that freight car that they've seen and have it on the shelf at home and be proud of it, right? And that's great. And that's basically what RPM is. That's the kind of difference between RPM and NMRA, but there's not really that much difference. It's the same people, just having a slightly different conversation, because unlike when you're with the NMRA is the house for everybody.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't want to make this religious, but the best example of this is everybody can go along to church on a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
and everyone will be in the general service, but then it fractures off, and you might have people go into a Sunday school group, and you'll have, but if the congregation is 100 people, 10% or less of them will turn up to Bible study on a Wednesday night, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what's their interest. They're serious, right? And I'm not saying that if you're not an RPM guy, you're not a serious modeler. I'm just saying that that's what your level of interest is in. You want to recreate that really perfect model of the freight car that Daisy shut down on at 12 o'clock, right?
Mm.
Then that's your place, and you find your home. But you'll go to an RPM meet, and there might be a couple hundred people there. So they're not, and everyone chips in and stuff like that, and they'll rent a room and they'll do whatever and blah blah blah. But they need that support, so that's what we do. It's enabling and empowering, and it's not a model that would translate well necessarily outside of the US either. Like in the UK, that level and standard of modelling tends to be within. Like in the UK, it's very fractured. So there's different gauges that, because double O isn't scale, the track gauge isn't right. HO is close enough, but there's still a Pro 287 group, right? Like in the UK, in 4mm scale, which is double O, there are 3 different groups.
Mm-hmm.
There's P4, there's EM, there's double O gauge society, and then there's Scale Forum, which represent everyone that does scale, right?
Yeah.
And within those groups, you'll get people that are more into the scratch build something, they want it to be realistic. But then the historical societies in the UK, like the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway Society, the LY, the L&W, the Southern Railway, whatever little railway company it is, like Queensland Railway Company would have its own historical society. They'll have a modelling section, and that's where you'll find your people with the same kind of mindset for RPM.
So
in those groups.
You just reminded me.
Slightly different.
You just reminded me of something that I want to mention in a minute, which was one of your detractors that I encountered. I actually did encounter one by accident. So we'll get to that in a minute. But it intrigues me that you get these people. So okay, you rivet counters and all that. I actually personally hate the term rivet counter because we're all bloody rivet counters. It just depends on to what level of rivet counting we are. Right, we're trying to make a miniature version of something that's real, right? And so to some degree, we're doing that. Otherwise, we'd all have plasticine boxes or balsa wood boxes sitting on bogies that came from God knows what, running on track of varying scales and this and that and the other. Like, I mean, there is always some degree, but there is always a compromise because, and my favourite one is that, you'll get someone that will do an absolute gold standard jaw-dropping model, if it's American, say, of a wagon, a car, and then that's great, it's perfect, but you can't run the thing. Like, you can run it around and around in a circle or something maybe, but you can't actually operate with it. Well, the real one you can, because otherwise it wouldn't exist, and so there's that compromise, but people tend to get very annoyed when you mention these things, right? Whereas I which me being me, I like to mention these things, but it's a case of I enjoy the operations, I enjoy the interaction with other people and the operation side of it. So yeah, there is always compromises you need to make, and it's just a question of what those compromises are, and they're different for everyone. So yeah, and Daisy's bowel movements notwithstanding, that will sort of vary from person to person.
Well, it doesn't matter, does it? No. That's the thing. It doesn't matter. Just enable each other to improve and be better. Teach somebody when they want to be taught. Don't tell them their stuff is crap. We all have a bad day, right? And bring people up.
Yep.
And that's it. Like in the US, they have free rail, O gauge free rail. Personally, I don't like finding unexpected middle legs, right? In anything, and it jars me every time I see it, right?
What, find a middle leg?
It jars me.
That would come.
Right. There's a rail right down the middle, right? Not where you're expecting it.
If I edit the video at just the right spot, it's going to take on a whole new meaning, mate.
Right. So you're not expecting that dodgy middle wicket, and then it's there, and it jars me. And there's people that put scale couplings on O gauge free rail stuff. It still jars me, but I don't disrespect anybody who's modelling in it. And there's some MMRs who've modelling free rail, and that's what they've got, and that's what they use, and that's what they do, and they do some really good scale modelling in it. Personally, I can't get over the fact that it shouldn't have that third rail there, right?
Yeah.
And it jars me, but because I grew up with two rail old scale.
So
stuff,
I'm the same. The 3-rail stuff, I just cannot get past it. I have seen videos on YouTube of guys doing what in any other scale or combination would be insane modelling, but they're still on 3-rail. And so you're watching this jaw-dropping model on a straight piece of track go around a ridiculously tight curve where the headstock of a diesel locomotive is now, 20 feet out to the left of the body. And I just look at it and it doesn't, I'm the same. I agree with you 100% on that. I cannot get my head around the 3-rail side of things. It does not compute. But
no.
To each their own. There are people out there that like having when they get surprised with the third leg.
But each to their own, and you've got to try to learn. So somebody can be really good at one aspect of the hobby and terrible in others. Loads of people say they can't do electronics. I love electronics. I would do electronics all day long. Scenery, I'm colourblind. I'm terrible at it. Painting and weathering, I'm colourblind. I'm terrible at it. Assembling something and scenery, I'm brilliant. If I could assemble kits and never have to paint them, they'd look beautiful.
Yep.
Right? You're totally square and everything. I'm colourblind. I struggle. I really, really struggle with it. That's why I started doing snow scenery, because it's easy. Just avoid the yellow snow, right? You can't really get away with that in Australia, can you? But don't use certain types of hairspray to apply your snow scenery material, because it dries yellow, and yellow snow is not what anyone wants, right? So, hence I do a mug on my website, the Gordy.uk mug, and on the back of it says "Beware of yellow snow." That's the joke in there. So there's always a joke in everything that I do.
I think every single conversation I've ever had with you, you've mentioned yellow snow.
Yeah.
I think it's your second.
Be wary. It is. As a person who like sets their layouts in winter, right? Yellow snow is a major risk because glues make things turn. When it's white, you've got to be so careful.
Yeah.
Because if you actually, and it's difficult for an Australian, but when you are in a snowy landscape and it's fresh snow, it's perfect. It's immaculate. And even when they clear the snow, the dirty snow is only at the side of the roads. One thing snow shows is how much pollution you get from roads.
Right.
Because very quickly the snow goes grey and darker the longer it's there at the side of a road. But the snow in a field, the snow on trees, snow on buildings, will be perfect white snow. So you've got to be so careful when you're modelling it. There's the slightest overspray and you've wrecked it.
Yeah.
And it's not a recoverable position. It's impossible to recover from getting something on your white snow. So I have the utmost respect for people that model snow layouts, and that's why the whole yellow snow thing comes from it, because you could spray a glue, you could use the same glue to do any other type of year scene with grass or mud or whatever. It'll dry beautifully clear. But as soon as you let it go anywhere within a hair's breadth of something that is pure white, it's turning it a different colour. And it's so easy to see with white that it's changed colour.
So you get like a line of yellow that looks sort of reminiscent of line dancing at the old folks' home.
You'll get like yellow hints in it. And you're like, damn, it's doff. Because then usually it's spray glue is notorious for it. And then it's blobs of yellow all over the place. And it just, you can see it, and that's it. You've had it. So yeah, that's hence the whole joke of beware of yellow snow.
We had you talk about clear and all the rest of that. one of the company that I used to buy the resins off for doing my kits, CG Composites, they used to have on their table, they did mostly marine stuff, but on their table they had like little items that were just cast out of all the different resins and all of that. And over the years, some of them would yellow, but they had this one, like a rock. It was about yay big, and it was an elliptical shape, right? And from all three dimensions, it was an ellipse. And it was beautifully smooth. It was just one of those things that when you held it, it just felt nice to hold, right? But it was perfectly clear. And it was about 2 inches thick at the thinnest part, and it was perfectly clear. And over the years, it just stayed clear. And I never found out what that resin was, but it was the most beautiful piece of resin I've ever seen because it just stayed water clear. And yeah, it just reminded me of it.
It's kind of what you want. That's kind of what you want in it. But it's I mean, it's a great hobby. I'm very blessed to be able to do what I'm doing with the NMRA, and it's never going to please everybody. But as long as the majority of people continue to get value from what I'm doing, then I'll continue to do it.
Now, it has grown since you've been as dear leader, hasn't it?
It's not. It did grow. It's kind of plateaued. The problem I've got is that majority of our members are old.
Yeah.
And when they don't renew because they're dead, you can't get them to renew. Like, you know what I mean? When you're dead, you're dead. You can't renew when you're dead. So we have got a major problem of bringing people in. And it's not unique to the NMRA. All organisations are like, why should I join that? But I think it's mental. It is an expensive outlay. But if you invest some money to be part of it, to help contribute to its existence, and then you actually put in the effort to get involved, like we are, you get oodles of benefit out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, oodles and oodles of benefit. Yeah, you don't need to pay to go on a forum on the internet and ask questions and go on Reddit or whatever. Of course you don't. And you can meet people by going to train shows and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the difference between the NMRA and that is that you're in a room with people who want the same as what you want, i.e. to improve their own modelling by interactions with other people, by sharing knowledge and sharing experience. And you've got that little investment that you're all kind of invested in that, and you get that benefit from it, and when the chips are down and you've got that group of, it's like a second extended family, and if you put into it, if you travel and you want to go and operate people's layouts and you travel and you engage, it opens so many doors, like unbelievable. I've got to stand there because of people that I know in the NMRA. I've got to stand there and they have waited to light the fire in the big boy so that I could watch them do it. I've had cab rides in locomotive, so it's not going to cab rides, but I've had cab rides in locomotive and never turned one down, if you're listening. Because of the NMRA, because of the people in the NMRA that I've met.
Yeah.
Not because I'm the president of the NMRA, and yes, being the president of the NMRA opens doors, but there's been my entire life experience of being in railway modelling has opened doors for me, and had people, share things with me that I wouldn't have otherwise got the experience of doing.
I kind of like getting into cab rides. Purely and simply because there is it's a very funny story, the cab ride story, right? But
cab rides,
yeah, but it also it actually does demonstrate something very special about the NMRA, I believe. In that, so for those that don't know, there was an American named Jordan, and we like Jordan. Jordan went and he stayed with you, didn't he? Right.
So Jordan came over to the British Region Convention
from Cincinnati,
Ohio, and I picked him up in Crewe, and he models the West Highland Line, and so between Crewe and me is the rest of the UK he hadn't seen.
Yeah.
So a long way.
I love and am mildly obsessed with just the fact that Jordan is modelling the Scottish Highland Line in Ohio, because like British layouts are British layouts, American layouts are American layouts, Australian layouts are Australian layouts. But here's an American using American modelling styles to model a Scottish line. And from looking at his track plans he's done, that layout could be spectacular.
If he ever gets the space for it, yes.
Yeah, I mean that, but I'm mildly obsessed with what he wants to do because I.
Well, yeah. Well, he asked me. He said to me, "I want to model something British. I want to model something in Scotland. What should I do?" So I am completely responsible for this because I said if I was modeling Scotland, there are two things I would model. Either you want to model either the Highland main line from Perth to Inverness, or which gives you some double track, but there's not many industries on it, or the West Highland line, which has got tons of industry on it. It's got short trains. It's perfect. It's short trains, short stations, nothing longer than 7. No platform is longer than 7 coaches.
Yep.
Which means no longer than 700 feet. And they're short trains. They're nice locomotives. It's all diesel, nothing electric. It's up some big grades. It's got everything. There's everything goes up that line. There's a aluminium processing plant. There's timber traffic. There's steam trains on it, timetabled in the summer on the main line. Like, it's everything you could wish for. And so he was modelling it. So we were driving from Crewe, and I was taking him home, and I said, well, we'll go and photograph every single station, bridge, and place of interest on the West Highland line, and I'll take pictures of you. He's 6 foot tall. Then you stand next to whatever we're taking a picture of. You'll be able to then measure it from yourself when you get home, right? So we did that, and unfortunately it was November, so it was very short windows of opportunity because there's only 6 hours of daylight at the end of November in the north of Scotland. So we were up there out at the crack of Sparrowfart. He didn't know what was going on. I don't think he's ever got up that early in his life. And off he went. I had him out with drive few 50, 60 miles, get up, get going. As soon as the sun came over, we were already on the first platforms measuring things before the sun was up. Every morning that we were up there. And he learned a few things about travelling, like with a British person. Like the kettle would come out every now and again. I remember he was standing on the platform at Bridge of Wuiske, which is quite exposed. It's near Scotland's only gold mine. And the station building's still there. It's been taken over, though, by the gold mining company. It's their offices. And he was waiting for the train, and we could hear the train slipping, trying to get up the hill because of the leaves on the line and everything, and it was struggling. And I said, I'll be back in a minute, I'm a bit cold. And I walked back onto the platform with 2 brews. And he was like, where did you get them from? I said, I just made them in the back of the car. Like, I just got the stove out and made a kettle, made a brew. There you go. Like, but we were up in Fort William, and we'd been following the sleeper, and this crew had seen us through the various previous days, photographing the line. We went to Speembridge to watch the service train and the sleeper train pass each other. Now, the service train's a diesel multiple unit, and the sleeper is a freight locomotive from GB Rail Freight with passenger cars from a different company, and then it goes from different points in Scotland and assembles into a big train that goes all the way to London once it gets down to the central belt of Scotland. And we're on the platform, and the guy offered him a cab ride. Now, it was dark, but because the train leaves at like 8:30 at night, so it was dark. It's about 9 o'clock at night when it's got to this second station down the line. And Jordan turned the guy down.
So now cab rides over there are just verboten. You don't get cab rides, do you?
Not really. Not with our health and safety regs. You just wouldn't get a cab ride normally. It's not normal to be offered a cab ride. But these guys had seen us out on the. So the crew, the locomotives get stabled there, but the crew themselves had been running a railhead treatment train, and they'd seen us at one of the other stations at Lower Tyndrum. They'd seen us earlier in the day, and we'd been talking to him because he got stopped at a signal waiting to rejoin the main line. So the guys knew who we were. They knew why he was there. We'd had a conversation with him, but he turned him down on this cab ride because he thought I would be upset that he disappeared. As soon as he went over there and I saw him, because I was on one platform, he's on the other one. I'm looking through the cab windows. I can see the guy talking to him. I was like, he's going to get a cab ride. Awesome. I'll just go in the pub. Because there's a pub at the station. I was like, I'll just go in the pub and have a pint. Because I knew they'd take him down so far and put him on the next service train coming back.
Yep.
And that's what they offered to him, but he didn't take it. So, yeah, the following morning, he got ribbed by me. I was like, you've come 5,000 miles to photograph this line. Yes, it's dark, but you get the opportunity to see the line in the dark and understand how it works and what it looks like, and you'll get to see what the driver sees as he's approaching the stations in the middle of the night, because it would have took him from Fort William up to Rannoch Moor, where there's absolutely nothing. There's a station there, Koura, and there's nothing there but the people that live there, and the only way in and out of there is by train. You can't drive, there's no road.
Right.
And that's where they would have swapped him over and sent him back.
Yep.
And anyway, he turned him down. He's never been allowed to live that down now.
Well,
4 years later.
So my knowledge,
3 years later.
was it the following day or a couple of days later?
So it's the following morning then. So the following morning we're driving from Fort William. We've got to get the boat home to Orkney. So we're driving through the Great Glen, which is Loch Ness to anybody else. So we've just driven past Urquhart Castle. We're heading towards Drumnadrochit. And then from Drumnadrochit, we're going to cut across to Muirvord, skip Inverness to the north, pick up the Far North Line and follow the road and the Far North Line up to John O'Groats to get the boat to Orkney. And we joined your chat.
Yeah.
And we had a long discussion about how much of a numpty I'd have to be to go all that way and turn down a cab ride.
I've never heard the word fecking so much in my life as I did in that discussion. You were going off, and Jordan, to his credit, he's just sitting there going, yeah, I did the thing, it was the funniest chat. And in the meantime, you're sort of just going, oh, by the way, there's Loch Ness, and then going back to hurling abuse at Jordan, and it's like, wow, that's the most beautiful thing, right, for an Australian that lives in the bush. It's just, you're like, this is nothing like anything I've ever seen in my life. What's on the screen, and it's just littered with...
Yeah, so we'd set the phone up. So the phone was in a holder so that people don't think I was holding the phone and driving.
Yeah.
The phone was in a holder, and we flipped the camera around so you guys were looking through the windscreen. And we're driving down the Great Glen in Scotland, which is absolutely beautiful.
Gorgeous.
Pine trees, hundreds of feet tall either side of you, massive, like 3 or 4 meter thick tree trunks at the bottom, absolutely beautiful. You've got the lake to your side, stunning scenery as we're driving along, and these guys are listening to me giving Jordan addressing down, and then we headed up into the mountains. Oh yeah,
it was the funniest, and it was one of these things that, because of the vision we were getting was just stunning. Right, and it's, because we've all seen little bits of the Scottish Highlands and this and that and the other, on TV, whatever, right? And it's gorgeous, but you don't see these bits like just a general road, right? You don't see, and it's just as beautiful as the postcards and things you've seen. And you're just like, wow, this is the most, and in the meantime, this feckin' idiot. And it was just, and every now and then Jordan would try and throw in a bit in his own defence, which lasted almost an entire syllable. Then you just keep going back.
There is no defence, is there?
And
he's never. To be fair, when the female guard, the young female, as he described, a very attractive guard on the train, going south afterwards, because he had to get the train from Thurso down to Inverness, offered him a cab ride in the back cab. We don't know what ride he got, but he got to sit in the back cab of the DMU going south. He didn't turn it down. He's never turned the cab ride down since. You've got to guide and educate the next generation.
Well, that's really what the NMRA does, and you're providing a service really there, aren't you?
Absolutely, yeah. It was a free service too.
So I'll have
So
to get
it's a learning.
everything.
Everything. There's many opportunities. It was a learning opportunity. It was a life lesson that I wasn't passing up the opportunity to educate. So we're driving along. We were doing the little bit of education and mentorship at the same time as pointing out all the nice scenery. Because I mean that's a beautiful part of the world, and not wanting to throw in another World War II reference, but here's one coming. Of course, Speen Bridge, the station where Jordan turned down the cab ride, is where everyone who wanted to be a commando in World War II got off the train at that station and had 20 minutes or something to do the 7-mile run over the mountain to the commando training centre. And they would get off the train and get told, run. And if they didn't make it within the allotted time, they were put in a truck and driven back, and the exact same train, they would be put back on it because it would have gone to Fort William and it would now be going south and they'd be returned to unit.
Really?
That was the commando test. If you couldn't do that run, if your level of fitness wasn't up to doing that,
you weren't good enough.
You were out immediately. You weren't fit enough to start training. And you were gone, and that was it. That's how strict it was. So there's a Royal Marine Commando Memorial is on the hill there between Speen Bridge and the training centre, and that was where I took Jordan, and that's where I was driving through, showing you guys that. And we jumped in the car at the Commando Memorial, and I drove you from there all the way through and out to the North Sea. So you went all the way across Scotland and got to see all of the scenery, and it is absolutely stunning.
It is.
So
the thing I love is that story with Jordan. It's funny, but it's sort of taken on this other life for a while, where an American in Scotland doing a buff-headed thing has been. I've seen Germans, French, British, Scottish, Australian, Americans just ripping the piss out of him, and I think it's brilliant. I think it's absolute. And Jordan's sort of he takes it and he takes it in his stride.
Yeah, he's a good sport. Yeah. He's a good sport. And to be fair to him, he said to me that day, and it was 3 years ago, I will never make this mistake. I will never make the same mistake again. And you know what? He's never turned down any opportunity since. And if you go through life and you take every opportunity that life gives you, you'll live a very fulfilled life. And that was the thing. What was holding him back was an irrational fear.
Yeah.
And that holds a lot of us back from doing a lot of things. I'm not saying that we should all go jump off buildings and see if we die or not at the bottom. That's not what I'm saying.
Very philosophical here. I support this.
But if you don't get off your ass and do something, you'll never do it. Like, there's so many people that collect trains and never get them out of the box. There's so many people that go and do these things and never get to actually do it because they don't take that step. Like, what's the best thing you can do? Take one step forward.
Yeah.
The worst thing you can do is not make a decision, is not to do something. And that's what. It goes all the way back to when I was a teenager, and I was told I couldn't do any modelling, and I couldn't do this, and I couldn't try that. And those guys just give me that nudge and that encouragement of, why not? Of course you can. Just do it. Just have a go. And that's, everyone needs that push in their life at some point.
You basically turned this into a motivational speech.
I always try to motivate people. I didn't know where this was going. He just randomly said to me, like, let's get on a podcast. Like, just come and talk to me.
Yeah.
So, you're getting what you get.
The thing is that I just love that it's gone international, but for whatever reason, it just popped into my head when you said about, that Jordan has not turned down a cab ride or any offers ever since then, is that God help us if someone in a white van pulls up and says, do you want to ride? I've got lollies. It could go very bad. So, because, but the thing is that I do like.
I could go somewhere with this, but I'm not going to because I will get into trouble. But he's had some interesting experiences. I think he's avoided any surprised third rails, but he's had some interesting experiences since his first trip to Scotland. And you know what? For a lad, a single lad, to go abroad on your own for the first time is a big thing, you know. And and if it wasn't for the NMRA, he would never have met all of us. He would never be modelling the West Highland line. Mm-hmm. He would never have had the opportunity to turn around a cab ride. He would never have had an international discussion about his bravery.
Yeah.
And taking opportunities that he got. All of that would never have happened.
And
you know.
And he would have built up and without that cab ride, or lack thereof, he wouldn't have actually built up the comradeship that he's got with so many people as well, because that story has gone a fair way.
Oh yeah, and like he could get on I could get on a plane, come over to Australia and get well looked after. He could get on a plane, come over to Australia, be well looked after. You know, that all comes from the NMRA, right? That wouldn't be a thing if we'd not been met through the NMRA. So
sure, and
you know, that's what the NMRA gives you.
So now, whilst I think of it, I have got the thing of your one detractor that I have encountered. Right, is so I remember it before, and I I actually wrote it down. I've got to mention this to you because I haven't told you about this. So I was in our chat. This is probably 3 or 4 months ago, and so Gordy has been doing 3D printed modules in N-Scale, right? And it's a big thing. And at first I was like, well, why are you doing that? And then it was just, you know, shipping and getting from, because everyone jokes that I'm in the middle of nowhere, and Marty always says, you know, he's not in the middle of nowhere, but you can see it from his balcony, you know, and things like that. Gordy's actually in the middle of nowhere, right? You're on a bloody island, and you've got to take a plane that, well, I made bigger paper aeroplanes in school, right, to get to civilization, right? And then you're still at the very top of Scotland, right? So, yeah, and so radio. So to be doing all this stuff going all overseas and everything, it's no mean feat. And then, you know, if you want to take anything with you, you've got so many considerations like weight and size and everything else. Which there is an irony that weight and size is a consideration in America, but that's another story that we won't get into. But then so, you know, you had this idea of 3D printing modules. And so I was talking about it, and you were showing it in the Bruin Natter and this and that and the other. And I was like, shit, that's all right. I like that. That's quite neat. And it actually works. And you'd gone through the problems of structural integrity and this and that and the other and all that. And I was mentioning it in our Friday night chats that we do here. And someone said, oh, but why has he done that? And it's like, well, I'm assuming his ears are painted on because I've just gone through all of that. Right? And I just said, oh, well, aside from for the reasons that I've just mentioned, is it just like all of us, he had an idea and thought, shit, I wonder if I can do that. Right? And so you did. Well, that's how everything happens, isn't it? And he's gone, oh, yeah, but what's the point? And I've gone, well, so that he can have a module that he can take to places other than next door, you know. And, oh, yeah, but why is he doing that? And I said, it's sort of I started noticing this sort of circular argument, right? And it was going on, and he said, oh, no, well, that's just bloody silly. And I've gone, how? That's genius. It's a great idea, right? And other people have actually taken it up as well, haven't they? Yeah.
There's plenty of people now 3D printing stuff.
And yeah, he just couldn't seem to fathom the idea. And so basically, you know, I'm glad you're sitting down because this may come as news to you, but Gordy's basically stupid for doing this. There's no point. And, the conversation was very strange. But, yeah, it was basically, well, no, Gordy's stupid. He shouldn't have done that. There's no need for it. And and all of that. But you could actually see the other people in the chat room were just sitting there rolling their eyes into a coma with disbelief, because they couldn't believe the shit that was coming out of this guy's mouth. So if you're watching that guy, you're an idiot. Just deal with it. You know. All right? This cannot be news to you. But that's the only person I've ever met outside of an Australian NMRA meeting, regional meeting, that were detractors of yours.
But you know what? It don't matter, does it?
No.
No one's asking him to do it. You don't have to 3D print it. Make it out of plywood. Crack on. You pay the excess baggage. So I took by 3D printing those ends. I took a module. And look, if every single person 3D printed their Fremo modules, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
It wouldn't work. The thing would fall to pieces because of the pressures on it. It wouldn't be able to take it. Right. When you've got a setup of 600 modules, the pressures on it, it would push. It would lift the foam. It wouldn't work. But for one module or two modules set up, spread apart within it, you can use this mutual support either side of you to hold you up, right? And it works. And I've got two modules in the States that I 3D printed that travel around. And different things have happened, and we've, just like anything else, they're prototypes, so we've done like reinforcements and 3D printed replacement parts. That's the great thing about 3D printing, because when one of the guys says to me, I've broken it, I can go, hang on, 3D print, I can either send them the file or I print it myself and pop it in the post.
Yeah.
You can't do that with plywood. Like,
no.
You know. So I can just go, I can make you an exact part for that. If let me make it for you. So yeah, Jordan was at a train show in Ohio, and he was like, hang on, that's Gordy's module. Did Gordy give you that module? And he went, who's Gordy? And he found my files, printed them, and made one of my modules and didn't realise who I was. And he presented it as his own work, as his own thing, which it was. He printed it himself. I don't think he knew what CAD was, but he printed it himself, and there you go. So yeah, it's interesting, but again, it's just another example of no one's going to make you do what I've done.
Yeah.
You know, and nobody wants to model. Not everybody wants to model the exact same freight car on the exact same day in the exact same place with the exact same load, right? The same thing. It doesn't matter. Just have a go. Just as long as you're enjoying it without hurting anybody, then that's all that matters.
Yeah, and
you know?
But I thought that for want of a better term, argument that this guy put up was just hilarious, because he used a lot of words to say nothing. And it effectively translated to, well, I don't like it. Well, okay, good for you. Right? I don't like the government charges me tax, but it doesn't seem to stop them from doing it for some reason. You know, and so, yeah, but that is the closest I've come to having a detractor of Gordy. And yeah, I've been curious. And yeah,
what's the phrase you guys use in Australia? Dillygaff.
Dillygaff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. It's we don't really use that phrase, to be honest. But you know, it's yeah.
Well, one of your famous comedians does.
Yes. Yeah, he wrote a song called it.
He wrote a song about it. He wrote another song about one of my favourite words as well, which I'm not allowed to say.
Did that start with "you can't say" and finish with "in Canada"?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, so for those that aren't aware, it's Kevin Bloody Wilson. You can't say certain word in Canada. And that was because when he got off the plane, his manager said to him, oh, by the way, Kev, you can't say this word in Canada. And he said, well, fuck, you can in Australia. So he decided to write a song about it, this part of the female anatomy, and he managed to get that word in there about 167 times, along with every other possible definition for it or description of it that there was. Which, and so that's what he opened his show in Toronto or something with. But yeah. You got in trouble for using that word, didn't you, recently?
I get in trouble all the time for using that word, but this is there's a guy on TikTok who is American who comes over to the UK because he thinks weirdly that British food is amazing. He's just completely infatuated with the UK, and he did a recent TikTok video about UK phrases that he now repeats in the US, and he used that word. Well, like his favourite word, he says his favourite British word in saying is bellend.
Yep.
Right? Which is not used in America, which is great for me because I can use some phrases in the States and people don't realise what I'm actually saying. But that word, I inadvertently used it in front of his mother-in-law. And when he woke up, he explained where he learnt it from. So, you know, it's very highly offensive in the US. It's not so in the UK. It's used as a term of endearment. People say it to each other just like in the rest of the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
There are other words that are used in the US that are highly offensive in the UK that would not be said in the UK. You know, but when people say those words to me, I don't like go and react and have a massive
I'm curious.
hissy fit over it.
So I can't think of any.
Well, yeah, probably because we don't have a sense of humour failure when people use them. But there are things that you could say in the UK and the phrases that you would say that can be quite offensive compared to that.
But you just said that there are words that they use in America that are quite offensive in the UK.
Right. Well, for example, the F word.
Yeah.
Like the F word in my family is considered to be a much worse word than the C word.
So for those of you watching at home, leafing through dictionaries,
both are 4 letters.
That word is fuck.
Yeah. So that's considered much worse in my family than the C word. Like I didn't get my mouth washed out with soap for using the C word, but Ola did for the F one. And you know, like calling I mean, in the States they don't really call someone a twat, and they can never say it.
Yeah.
But that's mildly offensive. I'll tell you a funny story from work this week. We went and talked to the high school kids about software development. One of the things that's used in software development is Git as a repository for version control. And the guy we're presenting to 16-year-old high school students, and the dev that was with me used the word Git. Just completely didn't even realise, and all the kids suddenly looked over to their teacher. Like, he's just swore in class, sir. And we had to explain to them what Git was and that it didn't mean whatever they thought it was in this context. And that comes from the States.
Mm.
Git comes from the States.
Does it really?
Git as a word in the UK is quite offensive.
I didn't know it came from the States. So that terminology in technology comes from the States.
In technology, yeah. I'm sure Git it's a US company.
But I only learned probably 10 years ago what Burke means.
Burke.
And it's Berkeley. Oh, you can work it out from there. And I didn't know. And so radio, because one of my favourite TV shows of all, Only Fools and Horses, right? Ever so slightly British. You know, it's just, it gets used in there a couple of times. And, I didn't know what it meant. And so as a teenager, as a child, I was merrily using it without any idea what it meant. And then I found out what it meant. I was like, oh, okay, that's much worse than I thought. So, I quite liked that. But, it's just... It does interest me, certain things that, as you said, there is that combination of sense of humour failure and just people taking words differently in different locations. And I find it interesting briefly. And then I just sort of get to the attitude of just shut up and get over it.
Yeah, exactly. So,
but I did...
So, anyway, talking about shutting up and getting over it, how long has this been going for?
I know, I don't have a timer on it.
Right, 2.5 hours you've been yabbering on.
I do that, mate. You've managed to say about 3 words yourself. That's it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can pull a pin if you want. I don't mind. So yeah.
So
this
I do have stuff to do at some point.
This is all just an experiment. The idea is just someone suggested to me that I should do this, and so I gave it a crack. And
Really?
the second one.
Let Adam know if you've listened to all of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, message Adam and say, if you got to this point, message Adam and say that you at least got to this point. And if you didn't, well, you'll not hear what I'm about to say, but you should tell Adam how long it was before you first switched it off before you listened to the rest of it. And like, how many car trips did it take if you listen to podcasts in the car to listen to one episode of Adam's Rabbiting? Or Gordy's Rabbiting.
It was actually interesting. The last one I did with Lyndon, the first one, I had a look at we were talking about it in the chat, and I had a look at the analytics, and I shared them on the screen with Lyndon, and everyone, like 80% of the people that made it to nearly the end, switched off about a minute and a half before the end. So, and I worked it out. It's basically, between Lyndon and myself, we said, oh, well, we might as well wrap this up. We've been chinwagging for a while. And everyone seemed to just switch off at that point. So there was a minute and a half where we could have given out the cure for cancer or the secret to world peace. And nobody will ever know.
The thing is that what you don't know is how many people started listening to it.
Yeah.
And then it just naturally came to an end while they were still snoring.
There is that.
You know?
It's funny.
At least the people that stop listening before the end of a podcast, you managed to achieve pissing them off, but they stayed awake.
Yeah.
Like the people that listen to a podcast from end to end in one go, they really just fell asleep. And then it just naturally came to an end. So that's most of the viewing figures for A Modeler's Life and all these other really, really long podcasts, is that they just fell asleep halfway through. And it just naturally came to a conclusion.
So is this the bit where we should say that for all those people sleeping, we can see you? Right? Or is that a spider? Well, I've always wanted to
see, is that a spider only really works in Australia, right? Like,
well, no. Is that a spider everywhere? But in Australia, the answer is yes. Yes, it is.
You're leading me in towards, us talking about normally our convicted cousins, but getting down that route. But it's true, there is a reason why you're there, because everything's trying to kill you.
You haven't mentioned sandpaper. I think this is the first conversation where you haven't mentioned sandpaper. So you've got it sitting there ready. You'll say it's for modelling, but it's actually just for the benefit of the colonials.
Well, you can see that I've used that on a bit of modelling, but yeah, I've always got sandpaper there just for every Australian conversation. We're watching. I put Australian rugby on the TV earlier, and Magnus that threw a paddy. He went, "Get this rubbish off." So can't win.
Right.
It's difficult watching rugby when the ball is like on the ceiling. So, but yeah, it's all good fun. It's all good fun. We managed to get all the way through this until sandpaper reference right at the end. That's probably the time to kind of wrap it up. But,
we can do that.
Yeah, at least we got the first hour of this was interesting. Then it went downhill into cab rides, and then it just went off. But this is the kind of thing. This is the great thing about it. We can just jump on and have a chat anytime, modelers from all over the world, and just talk trains. And that's what's so good about the internet and moving the hobby forward and stuff. Meanwhile, my wife's getting even more annoyed that I'm not helping with the housework right now. But it's all good.
Tell Alex I said sorry, but not really. But the thing is I actually find that it's when you get to... We talk trains and all of that, but it's when we move on to talking shit. That's when I found this more interesting and everything. It's not so much more interesting. It's more, more interesting, more enjoyable, or something. In that people seem to open up, and then I've had people talk to me afterwards and go, "That really helped me." And which goes back to what you said right at the beginning about 4 walls. And yeah, and
Yeah.
and I've been in that situation myself in the not too distant past, and yeah, it's radio. Yeah, it's a different take on things that I hadn't considered until all of the NMRA stuff and all of that started, and I started seeing things from a different perspective, and it sort of opened my eyes a hell of a lot to the role that things like this play, even through the medium of cab rides, and yeah.
I mean, mental health is a taboo subject.
Yeah.
Right? Still a taboo subject, but it's just like any other health, physical health or mental health. Some people have to have a lot more help with their physical health than others. Some people have to have a lot more help with their mental health than others. But everybody gets a cold. Just like everybody gets a cold, everybody has good and bad days.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone has a cold or a bit of an ache. Everyone has a good day and has a bad day. And if you can sometimes feel like you're having an overwhelming amount of things going wrong, like rejecting cab rides, or you can have an overwhelming feeling of things going great, like
getting a cab ride in the back of a train,
getting a new job or a promotion or a new train, and it helps, and we all in some way, whether we realise it or not at the time, help each other and prop each other up, and it's a family. It's a family sport, and this is the whole thing about all the politics that are going on in the world and stereotypes of different races and different people and all that. At the end of the day, my experience as a well-travelled person is people are still people.
Yeah.
And people are not. There are people out there in the world that are only out for themselves, but they tend to live very lonely lives. Eventually, and die miserable on their own. There's people
there's a lot less
that are just genuine, normal, open people that just want to help each other out and bring each other up and raise each other up together. It's what it's all about. And there's many more people in the NMRA that are like that than the miserable old curmudgeons that people tend to paint the picture of. Oh, I met this one miserable curmudgeon, so everyone's the same, and it's just not the case at all.
Mate, you're gonna have
it's absolutely not the case.
What the hell is a curmudgeon? I've never heard that one before.
Like, have you never heard curmudgeon? I've got another British term in there.
Never.
Right, hang on. We'll get there.
So that's going to be so. Now everyone's already tuned out because we've said we'll wrap this up, right?
Exactly. That's why I did it.
And so now you've got curmudgeon in there. So anyone who you were saying before, if anyone's actually gotten to this part, type curmudgeon in the comments because.
So in the Cambridge Dictionary, of course, you can be Oxbridge, but in the Cambridge Dictionary, it's an old person who is often in a bad mood.
Right. Well, fair enough. Okay. Well,
and we can all be often. We all have a bad day. We often all end up in a bad mood. But you meet that one really negative person, or you have that really one bad experience, and then you just get a tar brush and paint everybody the same.
Yeah.
Like miserable. What a miserable life you're going to lead. You know, like. Assume noble intent in people that you work with. Assume noble intent in everybody. Not everyone has noble intent, but like innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
Everyone should be treated with noble intent. Like the two guys who pulled guns on me in the States before in the past. I just apologised for being British. Pointed out that we'd never declared war on the United States, but they declared war on us twice. And apologised for being the wrong colour once, apologised for upsetting them by breathing, and they both times let me go without capping me or stealing from me or anything else because I wasn't what they were expecting.
That's a very brief summation of what sounds like a fascinating couple of stories. What?
Oh yeah, you've never lived if you never had a gun pulled on you.
I have, but it was a different situation, and it wasn't in the States, and I wasn't British. So right.
Maybe you need to be in the maybe you need to have been in the military or something to be a little bit less worried. I've seen people who have intent to hurt people.
Yeah.
I've seen real aggression from people. I've worked alongside Gurkhas and Paras, and they can turn aggression on like you turn a light switch on.
Yeah.
And they are the kindest, nicest people, but when they need to turn the switch on, they turn the switch on, and you better not be in front of them when they do, right? And then I've seen people who are doing something because they feel that they have to do it, which is generally the people that pulled a gun on me, because they felt either that there's been some kind of disrespect they didn't know about, or they felt some kind of threat, and you just once you explain the real situation, then you're all good. But generally, being British helps. When you've invaded all bar 22 countries in the world, or your ancestors have, then it's very easy for people to have preconceived ideas about what you're going to be like, and it's very easy to disprove those ideas.
So there's a to-do list, or 22 items on a to-do list.
Yeah. I don't know. You'd have to ask the king. But yeah, there's 22 still out there for us to get. It's like collecting Pokemon.
You've got to colonise them all.
Yeah, you got to get them all.
Colonise them as the snake so nearly went.
And it's the more people that you meet, the more you can learn. There's what I know in my head amazes me sometimes, like being able to roll off some of the facts and interesting things and stuff. And it's all stuff that I've really learned from the interest that model railways and the people in model railways has put me towards. So people just need to get out there. They need to get out their mum's basements. I don't know what the Australian equivalent is. Just get out the dunny and go and do something. I guess that's the Aussie equivalent. Like get your ass off the shitter and go and do something.
That's
all good fun.
Yeah. Wow, we've accidentally done a motivational video.
Yeah, well, that's what happens. That's why I'm the NMRA president. It's just Mr. Motivator without the muscles. Anyway, right. Are we killing it now? Can we kill it there? Can we leave it on that motivational speech of get off your ass and do something?
We'll do that, mate. Thank you very much for coming in. I've had a ball. Yeah, I like that. So yeah, thank you for those that are still awake, and for those that aren't, there's someone in your room watching you right now. So probably wake up and deal with that.
Those little HO people really have their own little souls. Is that what you're telling everyone?
Oh, that's so much better than where I was going. But yeah, I like that one. So yeah. Alrighty, mate, thank you very much. And for those that have enjoyed this and all of that, feel free to put the word, what is it?
Mudgeon.
Sorry? Mudgeon.
Curmudgeon, what word?
Curmudgeon.
The word curmudgeon, is that what you're saying? Curmudgeon, yeah.
Yeah. If you can work out how to spell it, put it in there. And yeah. Thank you very much, mate. We'll talk soon. And thank you to those that have stayed awake, if there's any of you. And yeah, good on you. Alrighty, we'll wrap it up there.
No worries.
Cheers, Gordy, mate. You take it.
See you soon.
Bye.